Father. Thank you for the wonderful rest. We praise your name. We ask your presence here this morning. Be with us, guide us, and guide Brother Jeff in the teachings he has for us this morning. We ask you and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
We have been considering thoughts on the first 4 verses of Daniel 11 and have decided to put them together for the consideration of the Future for America team. Lord willing, there is a prophecy school convocation towards the end of next month, which I will be privileged to attend and will, by God's grace, assist in the presentations. I intend on sharing the thoughts with the group given that they are accurate. Thus, I thought it wise to bring them to the attention of Future for America for further scrutiny. I acknowledge your busy schedule, but I pray you will be able to make time for these thoughts that I may begin appropriate preparations. And if these things are correct, they seem to add further clarity to the subject of the 4th King Xerxes and the mighty King Alexander being the same administration of this next president. Find the thoughts below. Brother William.
There are a number of thoughts we have been looking at in connection with Daniel 2's image, and our findings seem to suggest a pattern you can see consistently in multiple stories. It seems that the major highlight in Daniel 2's message is the nuts and bolts of how the threefold union come together, how the deadly wound is healed, how this system, as it is rising, is simultaneously being destroyed, and how God's people escape that system. For the purposes of this email, I will only touch on a few of the points we have thus far considered.
I have acknowledged the application of Daniel 2's image put on public record so far, but you'd like to set forth another consideration that does not necessarily contradict what has been put in place. We agree with the premise that Daniel is standing at the midnight cry, lifted up as an sign, when he gives clarification concerning Nebuchadnezzar's image, and one of the first points he mentions is that the head of gold is Babylon, the papacy. And though the papacy did indeed rule from 538 to 1798, we believe Daniel was also highlighting the fact that in the coming together of the threefold union of modern Rome, the papacy should be the head of the system.
As we approach the last Christ, it is of vital moment that harmony and unity exist among the Lord's instrumentalities. The world is filled with storm and war and perils. Yet under one head, the papal power, the people will unite to oppose God in the person of his witness. This union is cemented by the great apostles.
This is what I'm going to put up here isn't necessarily what this email's dealing with, and I'm not going to have a discussion about that. I'm just going to put it up there as a point of reference. But in another email dialogue that I have going on, it's been pointed out that there's an image test in this history for the world, and there's an image test here for the USA. And using the principle that we've been dealing with, there should be, the premise of the other email is that there should be an image test here, okay? And the person that sent in the email, I don't know if they followed the recent things that we've been doing in the school or whatever, but I would argue, I think we probably said it, that here at midnight, when the Adventist Church reaches out to the government of the United States to bring some kind of legal persecution upon the faithful, that is an image of the beast. That is the image of the beast that's marked here. So I would say there's an image test. Now, I'm not hard and fast on this Adventism here, but all I'm saying is we have the evidence that it's at least inferred at this history too, and then the image of the beast test for the United States and the image of the beast test for the world. But what we've also noted, and this is kind of the reason I'm going to put it in here, we know there's a threefold union right here between the beast, dragon, the false prophet, and I'd say that's political threefold union, political. Because we looked at here recently that here Satan's going to personate Christ. Here he comes as an angel of light, and when he comes as an angel of light, there's a threefold union between Protestants, Catholics, and worldlings. So there's a threefold union here, which I'm going to say is church. Religious probably would be better, but church. And I'm going to say there's a threefold union here. Okay, whatever it is, I'm just saying without defining it, that's probably demonstratable here with the state and the Adventist Church, and I don't know who else is in cahoots with that movement there, but
The Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Romans.
well, at the cross, the threefold union was pagan Rome, the state, the Jews, the church, and Barabbas, the counterfeit Christ, the false prophet. So here it'd be Adventism, the state, and maybe some manifestation of a counterfeit latter rain or whatever.
You don't think Judas would play a part in that, or it'd be one of the part of the
Judas,
threefold
one of the third.
Isn't the angel?
False prophet, what?
You said, well, Satan will be Christ there, and that here is the angel.
Personate Christ, angel of light. So what is the spiritual manifestation here? That's kind of what
I
you.
was thinking other way.
Oh, you're wanting to put the angel of light here.
Yeah, buddy.
Would be the foolish priests.
Foolish priest. Yeah, it's got to be something like that. I'm not claiming to know, but I'm saying that we have reason to think that the characteristics here and here are also going to be at least inferred there. So he's going to touch briefly on that. Let's keep moving forward with this. Sister, or Daniel, did you read? Sister Tanya?
Daniel then identified that there would be another kingdom, power, and theory to the head, and though this was historically identifying the sequence of the rise and fall of empires, we suggest that it is also pointing to the fact that in the threefold union, the spiritual Medes and Persians of the United States will be second fiddle to the papacy. There will be the arms and chest in the threefold union. Arms are a symbol of strength, and the two arms of the image are pointing to the two strengths of the United States, military and economic leverage. The chest is the seat of the heart, and point to the fact that Sister White points out concerning apostate Protestantism. Religious powers, aligned to heaven by profession and claiming to have the characteristics of a lamb, will show by their acts that they have the heart of a dragon and that they are instigated and controlled by Satan. The time is coming when God's people will feel the hand of persecution because they keep holy the 7th day. Testimony volume 9 to 28.
Okay, so you understand what he's saying here. He's saying that Daniel is at the midnight cry, and he's explaining the image to Nebuchadnezzar, and he's saying that the head of gold is the papacy, that's going to be the head of the threefold union, and that the Medes and Persians is the United States. Okay, so this is where he's placing this. Sister Cheryl?
Thus showing the leading role that the United States will play in the legislative of oppressive enactments of the upcoming histories, and in doing so, the Protestants of the United States will be acting out the mind of their mother, the mind of the head of gold. Then Daniel turns to the third kingdom of brass, which according to him would bear rule over all the earth. This is pointing to the one world government of the United Nations. Many things may be derived from the image, but for the scope of this email, we will move to other points. The major point I desire to highlight so far is the truth that seems to be consistent as set forth in Daniel 2, and that is, the papacy is the first ruler of the threefold union. It will fulfill the role of the head or command center of modern Babylon. The United States is the second ruler of the threefold union. It will be the military and economic muscle of modern Babylon. The United Nations is the third ruler of modern Babylon. It will be the universal governing body, authority of modern Babylon. This seems to unlock a number of important truths in the prophetic narrative. But moving beyond this, I will just make a few short points about the legs and feet, simply for the purposes of this email.
The legs historically applied to pagan Rome, and one of the truths that was specifically marked about this kingdom was its strength, as strong as iron. The symbol of the strength of Rome, according to the prophetic narrative, was the imperial city of Rome. And when the first introduction of the clay element, churchcraft, into the kingdom took place, which I suggest was Constantine's first Sunday law in AD 321. Prophecy marks a division coming into that empire. This division began shortly afterwards in AD 330, when Constantine shifted the capital of the empire from the city of Babylon to the city of Byzantium.
City of Rome.
City of Rome to the city of Byzantium. Thank you. Which he renamed Constantinople. This division is a subject of Bible prophecy. Daniel 8, 11, 11, 24, Revelation 13, 2, his seat, etc. So what was now taking place is that the Constantine administration was governing in essence two parallel empires, one in the west and the other in the east. In the west, the Bishop of Rome, a church power, was rising to take control of affairs. In the east, Constantine was simultaneously working to establish and implement a new government. According to Daniel 11, 24, 27 AD 330, occurred at the time appointed, which is a symbol of the Sunday law in our history.
Pagan Rome, at one level, typified the United States for a variety of reasons. And arguably, one of the principal points to establish this truth is the fact that as pagan Rome put the papacy on the throne of the earth for the first time, the USA will put the papacy on the throne of the earth the last time. And as pagan Rome, God's word also marks the strength of the United States. It is the principles of civil and religious liberty which are enshrined in the US Constitution. While governed by these principles, the USA, like pagan Rome, ruling from the city of Rome, has been the glory of the earth, invincible. But at the time appointed, the Sunday law, the United States, is to be divided. And this division is connected to the first Sunday law, and the midnight cry, typified by the first Sunday law of Constantine in AD 321, just before the time appointed in AD 330. But the midnight cry is also the time appointed. Therefore, AD 330 can also apply to the midnight cry, meaning the United States division begins at the midnight cry. And there is to be, like in the time of Constantine, two parallel empires in the United States. One will be under the control of a church power, apostate Protestantism, and at the same time, the president of this administration will be working to set up a new government, the one-world government of the globalists, which will be forced upon the whole world at Sunday night.
Okay, so before we move on, take some of this off. He's saying that at one level, this is 321 AD, this is 330 AD. But he's saying, because this is the appointed time, that this also can be 330. That's all he said, right? But that would imply this is 321. Yes? Okay, but anyway, I'm just walking the logic through. Sister Heidi?
One more point I would want to mention on. One more point I want to mention on the legs before moving forward is the legs in the scriptures can represent pillars, Song of Solomon 5:15, and the pillars denote strength and are a symbol of a covenant. I suggest that these legs of iron shed light on two counterfeit pillars which are to be the strength of the threefold union, the symbols of the satanic covenant, which will uphold the structure of modern Babylon until it is destroyed. The United States is the power that changes, and I suggest the two counterfeit pillars that are to be the strength of modern Babylon is not the principles of the U.S. Constitution, for the USA ignores these. It will be the two great errors of spiritualism and semi-sacredness, which the United States will lead out in presenting to the world, and thus deceive men into apostasy. Revelation 13:13-14. These are the two middle pillars which uphold the structure of the Philistine temples in Judges 16, which Samson brings down, thus destroying the entire structure and typifying the work of the stone and destroying the entire image by striking it at its feet to the base of two counterfeit pillars.
Okay, so if you're not familiar with that, and you should be, we've at least mentioned it in here, the two great errors that papacy takes the world captive with is spiritualism and the Sunday law. And Sister White's clear, you can show it in black and white even if you've read it and didn't get it, that there's a falling away first, and the falling away first by those that did not receive the love of the truth, that received strong delusion, it's going to take place here, the falling away first, okay? But it's going to lead to the man of sin sitting in the temple of God over here. So when it comes to Adventism here becoming part of Babylon, because that's the typical definition, the Seventh-day Adventist Church can't become a daughter of Babylon unless it would accept spiritualism and Sunday sacredness. Okay, so what we're saying is that there is going to be a Sunday law here, the first Sunday law, but back here, those people that did not have a love of the truth, they're going to receive strong delusion. That is spiritualism. Okay, the strong delusion is not an inference. That is coming under spiritualism control of the devil, as Judas did when he got up from the table and he was demon possessed. So he's saying this is a pillar, and he never put it on this line. I'm taking his thoughts and putting it up here, and this is a pillar, and which would mean that in this history the Levites are receiving the strong delusion, the false Levites, and will lead them to this Sunday law. Okay, so, but he's saying the strength of this statue is these two pillars, okay, but I'm wanting us to see that these two pillars, if that's valid, that they have a place. They line up with the waymarks we've been handling, okay. Theodore, read that one sentence and then the full paragraph.
The pattern of Daniel 2 becomes a point of reference for the following submissions. Daniel 5. We will skip right into Daniel 5. There is a truth that has been suggested concerning the 7 kings of Babylon, from the beginning of the 70 years to the fall of Babylon. This would be from Nabopolassar, Nebuchadnezzar's father, to Belshazzar, the last ruler of Babylon. It would thus be an illustration of the 7 thunders. Each of the illustrations of 7 thunders emphasize different truths, and we suggest that the truth emphasized in the illustration of the 7 kings of Babylon is the progressive coming together of the threefold union and its progressive destruction simultaneously. This would be an external line application of Daniel 5. It is acknowledged even by secular historians that Belshazzar was not the absolute ruler of the realm of the Chaldeans. His father was. And in the list of the kings, his father Nabonidus was the 6th in the sequence from Nabopolassar. Nabonidus was the first ruler of this sixth administration. Belshazzar was the second ruler of the sixth administration. And he exercised all the power of the first ruler before him.
I like that thought. The United States exercises all the power of the first beast before him.
And commanded that a third ruler of the sixth administration of Babylon be put in place. Thus we see an illustration of the threefold union of 666 in ancient Babylon. And in the days of this threefold union, Cyrus, the symbol of Christ, came and established his kingdom, where he co-rules with the saints.
Where he co-rules with the saints. What does that mean?
Can I make a comment? I've spent some time studying the kings of Babylon. Now, Nabonidus, he is the king, but he's not interested in ruling because he's involved in his religious worship of the moon god Sin, right? So he's away from the capital, and Belshazzar's really the ruler, right? He's running all the administrations within Babylon.
And the point is that I think that's what he was saying too.
Well, there's.
Oh, he's arguing that he's the supreme ruler, this guy?
Well, it's not that. He's the religious ruler, in a sense. He's dealing with a, he's concerned with temples and archaeology and stuff like that. So I don't know what part it plays, but it shows that he's not.
So you would add that this is church?
Well, yeah.
And this is state?
But the Bible doesn't show him active as doing that. The Bible doesn't show him active as doing that. He's not.
It doesn't show him doing anything.
Right.
Yeah, where do we see him in the Bible?
All we know that he's first ruling, and then the son is second in command. That's all we know, but we have no detail of whether he was a religious influence upon the throne or not. So.
Okay, you got any more to that?
No.
But this here is Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, the second.
Okay. Just for a point of reference. But he's saying, Daniel, he's going to say, or did he say, when
It seems to be implied somehow.
well, he knows Daniel's made third ruler in Daniel chapter 5.
But does Daniel really accept it? I mean, I guess, he's made, but he's not really.
It doesn't matter. It's what is being conveyed prophetically.
Yeah.
Sister Michelle?
You're saying Daniel's the third ruler and they're ruling together, so Daniel's part of the 666?
That's
No, I'm not saying that. He's at least inferring that. He's saying that he sees in these three a relationship that is paralleling a relationship that he sees at the end of the world in the story of the United States. And until I follow his logic through and test it, I'm not threatened by Daniel, the prophet, being the third ruler, because this would be the one that's behind the scenes is the papacy. This would be the beast, right? She's back in Samaria, out of the picture, the king of the north. Okay, that would be Nabonidus in this thought. This would be the state if what Theodore is saying is valid. So this would make Daniel the false prophet, right? Beast, dragon, false prophet. No?
Well, that's a the thing is there's lots happening there in Daniel 5.
Yeah.
You have his grandmother or whoever comes in. So this
the reason I'm saying that is as we read through this, he's dealing with this sequence here, threefold union, and even though Daniel's righteous, and this is an unrighteous 666 threefold union, this would be the false prophet. Is Daniel a prophet?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, he can be representing Seventh-day Adventism being offered something, or God's people being offered a union. He doesn't personally accept it. But
he does accept it.
Well,
he got the necklace.
Well, yeah, But he personally didn't want to accept it.
Yeah, okay.
He's not concerned about the gifts at all, so.
All right, that's not this guy, not this brother's point. Brother Arian, go ahead.
But in this co-rules of his saints is Cyrus and Daniel? What or Christ and saints? What does it mean?
Came in his staff. There are two kingdoms. In Daniel 2, there's two kingdoms. The statue is the satanic kingdoms, and Christ is Christ's kingdom. I think he's saying that in the time period when this satanic kingdom, the threefold union, is put in place, in that same period, Christ chose to set up his kingdom of glory. He doesn't get into that detail in here, but that's how I was understanding it.
Which would make sense because Cyrus is actually co-ruling with Darius, right? Which actually the father and the son, so it would make sense that you can apply Cyrus as Jesus.
Well, yeah, but you don't have to do that to apply Cyrus as Jesus, but yes, it fits there too, at that level. Arian?
The point being, this revelation shows us that Belshazzar can represent the United States, which exercises all the power of the first beast before it to establish the third ruler of the one world government. And the sentence pronounced against Belshazzar is that his kingdom would be divided. Here is the second witness to the division of the United States. Without doubt, this division is completed at the Sunday law, but it begins and therefore can also be marked at the midnight cry. And like Constantine's administration, it would be divided to two powers, the Medes and the Persians. I would suggest...
how was Constantine's divided into two powers? East and West, okay, so we're all on the same page. Keep going.
I would suggest that symbols can have more than one meaning, and the division of Belshazzar's kingdom to the Medes and Persians could also illustrate the two parallel empires which will characterize the United States at the midnight cry. Cyrus is also called a ravenous bird in the scriptures and would illustrate the church power taking control of the United States. And Darius, who was a king for 2 years in a transitory period from one kingdom to another, I suggest would be illustrating the globalists taking control of the United States by using the administration of the next president to set up and thereafter implement and enforce a one world government. And these two kings were marked simultaneously.
Okay, so do we have a problem with that history, Brother Theodore?
No.
Okay, so take note of what he's putting in place here is 2 years. But I guess there'd also be 2 years on this side if this is 2 years, and there'd probably be 2 years over here.
Would there be also a period of time because when Cyrus tried to conquer Babylon, it took him a little bit of time until he actually progressively was able to stop the flow of the river. And we know that Belshazzar had a party or a celebration knowing that he's trying to be conquered, but finally says there's no way nobody can conquer it in Babylon because of the walls and all their supplies that had for many years. So while he was being conquered, while Cyrus was trying to get into Babylon, Belshazzar decided to have this feast saying like, no, we're not going to be conquered, we're not going to be taken down.
Okay. I'm not sure where to plug this in, but I do. He's going to deal with this 2 years.
As a symbol,
As a symbol.
not as a time.
No, time is no longer. We have to remind ourselves of that. Time is no longer. Okay.
We make this application of Darius the Mede line upon line with the story of Joseph in Egypt. Genesis 41. When the famine hits Egypt and all of Canaan by an east wind at the midnight cry, Joseph is the second ruler and fulfills the role of the second ruler by exercising all the power of Pharaoh, the first ruler before him, and sets up a one world government, the third ruler, and a 2-year period which is thereafter given into the hands of Pharaoh, the first ruler. It is the story of Daniel 2 and 5 all over again. I suggest that Pharaoh can represent the papacy within this context, and Joseph the United States. Pharaoh was considered a representative of the sun god on earth, and he was also the first ruler, following the pattern set forth in Daniel. Joseph clearly fulfills the role of the United States, and what Joseph does in this crisis is he centralizes all the resources and wealth of Egypt and Canaan, and is in direct control of the world's reserves all that time. And he would thus illustrate the fourth king of Daniel 11 being far richer than they all. And while the Egyptian government was running, Joseph was establishing a parallel empire which would control all the nations. Thus, I would think that Darius' 2 years can line up with Joseph's 2 years, from the midnight cry to Sunday law. And as the newly established government was then committed into the hands of Pharaoh, so also Darius died, and the kingdom was taken over by Cyrus, who Ezra also calls the king of Babylon. Ezra 1.
Okay, there's a lot of lines in there, and I can use some help in making sure that we plug all these little points onto the board here. So what he's saying now, he's saying in Daniel 5, Nabonidus is this king, and Belshazzar is this king, and somehow Daniel represents the third part of this threefold union that begins to be set up. There is a threefold union here that we've marked when Satan appears as an angel of light between the religious parts, the Protestants, Catholics, and worldlings, she says. That is typifying the threefold political union of the beast, dragon, and false prophet. So from here, the word dominion, I think it's in verse 4 of Daniel 11. I think it's in there twice. Maybe it's verses 3 and 4. But it's two different words that are translated as dominion. And the second one can be, among the other definitions, be understood to be parallel kingdom. So he's using that definition of dominion to say that there are two kingdoms in here simultaneously, which is what we're suggesting, is that the last president of the United States is still the president of the United States while he's in the process of setting up or taking control over whatever it is of the seventh kingdom of Bible prophecy, which is the United Nations. So now he's reaching out, and there's, pay attention to, so I don't leave anything out here. And he's saying that Joseph as the second king, Pharaoh is the first, Joseph's the second, don't know who the third is. So where would we put, how would we incorporate this in here? Because this 2 years, this is the famine that hits Egypt with the east wind. Pardon me?
Pharaoh would be back before the midnight cry.
Pharaoh would be back here.
Is that how I'm understanding what he's saying? And then Joseph?
Well, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Pharaoh may be back at a waymark on the line, but Pharaoh, the first king, the one that is the papacy, the bottom line of the papacy is that in the story of Elijah, Jezebel's not there. In the story of John the Baptist, Herodias is not there. They're pulling the strings, but they're in the background. Okay, so she doesn't technically begin to sing her song and commit fornication until the Sunday law, although we know she's doing all kinds of activities in the background. But prophetically, it's not until the end of the United States that she goes out and commits fornication. So she's there, and the second king is exercising all the power of the first beast before him, the power of the papacy. So I don't think you necessarily have to put the first king at a waymark. Maybe you do, but the testimony is that she's behind the scenes. She's forgotten. Brother Bud?
Well, I see where he's saying that Joseph was establishing a parallel empire which would control all the nations, which seems to me to be typifying the United States, the President of the United States having control of the UN.
Yeah, he's saying, he's setting it up, he's taking control, but it's not officially the seventh kingdom with him in control until the Sunday law. But in this history, the advance work is going on. So he's the king, the president of the United States, and he's becoming the king of the United Nations. So thus the word dominion in verse 4 of Daniel 11, parallel kingdom.
He marks the dream of Pharaoh as Joseph at Sunday law is starting. So this 2 years prior to that is when he's in jail. That's what he said.
He marks the dream of Pharaoh
At Sunday law.
at the Sunday law.
And 2 years, and he said, because in Genesis it says after two full years that Pharaoh dreamed.
No, that's not the 2 years that he's dealing with, I don't think.
Which one?
He's dealing with the breakdown of the years of the famine.
Oh.
The famine hits, and then it's 2 years until Jacob and his brethren and his sons come into Egypt, which allows us to mark a 2-year period at the beginning of the 7-year famine. I'm pretty sure this is the 2 years he's dealing with.
Okay. There's other 2 years, which is the one
Yes.
after the interpretation of the beer, the cup beer, and the dream of Pharaoh.
Yep. Yeah, but, and no doubt if it's because it's 2 years and it's in the same story, there's going to be some connection, but we're not figuring that one out at this point.
Now, I did watch you guys work through the years of the famine. I don't think you did it correctly, but do we have to have the 2 years to do that?
Do we have to have the 2 years to do what?
What he's doing, do we have to have the 2 years of the famine in order to connect that?
To connect
We don't
Darius.
need the 2 years to connect what he's connected.
Darius and Joseph.
He connects it to Darius' 2 years though.
Yeah, he's making that case, but whether you only have to have it if it's true.
Right.
And you're arguing that the breakdown that we did on the famine in the past is not valid.
Yeah,
But we're not so sure at that. That's still up in the air till we go through it.
Right.
But what we have acknowledged openly is that if as we've got down this far in the stream of time, we realize that probably several of the lines that we've dealt with, we have to go back and fine-tune them with the advanced light. But one that we have acknowledged openly that we have to go relook at is the story of Joseph.
Yeah. There's a
So
lot there.
you might be right, but we're holding that off.
One thing, dealing with, if you want to find the parallel, so Daniel is the third, right, in the story of Belshazzar. And we say you haven't placed somebody as the third, because we have Joseph as the second. But Jacob and his family come, and they could represent.
So you're saying Daniel is Jacob.
Yeah.
And that would be the joining of the two sticks, the whole world together.
Yeah.
Okay, perhaps. Michelle?
He does say that Pharaoh sets up a one world government, which is the third ruler. And
Yeah, that's here. At the Sunday law, right?
But the third ruler is this one world government.
Yes. But I mean, we're going to place it at the Sunday law, right? So, and then we're going to determine who the third ruler is. In the story of Daniel 5, we would say it was Daniel.
So, but him saying it's the one world government is not determining what it is.
Yeah, it's determining what it is, but it's not determining who it is. In terms of Daniel 5, okay? I think we're saying the same thing, but for some reason I'm not following your point. But I think we're saying the same thing. I don't think I'm contradicting what you're suggesting.
I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, me too. You get to read.
But the word Belshazzar and Belteshazzar are pretty much very similar in the meaning. And so it's very interesting that when you have Belshazzar and Belteshazzar, which is Daniel, together almost as a doubling, somebody had made a comment saying that probably that Daniel had added the Belteshazzar because Belshazzar means Bel protect the king or protect his life, and adding the T meaning that Bel do not protect his life. But anyways, I think somewhat in there there's also a doubling.
Your turn to read, Sister Michelle.
Okay. The story seems to be consistent all the way through, and I think is also represented in Daniel 11 more than once. Daniel 11 verse 1 begins, I'm assuming, with us at the time of the end.
Begins at. And the us shouldn't be in there.
Okay. Daniel 11,
Or it could be for us or with us, you're right. But
Daniel 11:1 begins at the time of the end, 1989, when Bush won president of the modern Persian realm. From him, 4 kings would rise, and the 4th of these would be far richer than they all. I could be incorrect in my understanding of English grammar, but there is a point we discussed here in Zimbabwe concerning the statement made by Gabriel about the 4th king. Daniel 11 verse 2. And now I will show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia.
I have a question that's totally nothing to do with this, but how soon after the sermon on Sabbath did you put it on the web? I'm wondering if they looked at that sermon before they wrote this paper, or if they were coming to a similar conclusion and had not yet had opportunity to look at the idea that we have come to the same conclusion.
Probably either Monday or Tuesday. I don't remember exactly which day, but it was a couple days ago.
So it's Thursday today. I think they've come to the same conclusion then without knowing that we did, which doesn't, it's interesting but not germane to anything really. Sister Carol?
For analysis, did Daniel have a question?
Just wanted to be sure, he said that when Bush, first president of the modern Persian, the first president is not the Medo.
The first president is not...
Phi is not the Medo. Medo in Persian.
Medes.
Oh. You're going to make a distinction between Medes and Persians. What's the two?
No, I'm just...
He's wanting to know why or is George Bush the first a Mede or is he a Persian? And the 2 horns are church and state, and the church is conquered in the Millerite history, so the horn from that point on is the state until it gets overthrown. So I guess it depends on what you define the Medes and Persians are. If the Persians are the state, then no, it would be Persians that we're dealing with here at the end, but I don't have a better answer than that. I'm not sure. And it matters for those of you that haven't looked at it. When you get into Revelation 11, there seems to be information. It says of the church rising back up, becoming the predominant horn at the end, which is consistent with the Protestants taking control of the political structure.
I don't remember if I forgot which king Daniel 11 starts with, but didn't we identify, or at least portray the thought that Darius and Cyrus also mark sort of the co-rulership of Reagan and Bush at that 1989 time period.
That must have been in one of your evening discussions. That's the first time I ever heard that. But that, I'm not threatened by that.
I'm saying if that's the case, then Darius would be Reagan, and then Cyrus would be Bush, which would make Bush a Persian. And that, if that logic is even correct.
How did you get to the idea of co-rulership? What was the thoughts on that?
It wouldn't be co-rulership. It would be just from the fact that in Daniel 10:1 it's in the 3rd year of Cyrus, and in Daniel 11:1 it's in the 1st year of Darius, and therefore they're both the time of the end. So once you got them together, now you got the prophetic license to start defining which is which may be valid, but it's outside the scope of this paper. Sister Carol.
Our analysis of this statement is that Gabriel was informing Daniel that this next president shall be, future tense, far richer than they all. That is to say, it is in this president's time in office that he or she should be far richer. It is not identifying the personal wealth of political or potential presidential candidates. Our grammatical analysis could be incorrect. Perhaps it could be seen either way, but we still believe there is enough evidence to show that this is not referring to the personal riches of the current presidential candidates. And one of the points noted in Daniel 2 is that this king will use strength and riches to awaken all against the realm of Grecia at the midnight cry. We suggest that the strength referred to is the military might of the USA, and the riches is referring to the economic might of the USA, which will still be far above the world when the current structures collapse, and when, like Joseph, this next president will be placed in direct control of the world's reserves. These are the two arms of Nebuchadnezzar's image, which shall be employed to implement martial law in the USA and to facilitate the movements during the midnight cry, which will result in the establishment of the one world government. And then he quotes, "And a mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will." Daniel 11:3.
Which makes more sense. It almost appear at one point that we're making a little application was providing that, this man was richer in monetary.
Yeah, but read on, Brother Bud.
I acknowledge that the standing up of the mighty king was placed at the Sunday law. I would not desire to oppose this understanding, but it will set forth another understanding for your consideration. I suggest that the mighty king stands up at the midnight cry, where, based on the previous lines of Daniel 2 and 5 and Genesis 47, there will be two political empires. Two parallel, empires. One taken over by a church power, the other taken over by the globalists. I am not by this stating that the one world government begins at the midnight cry, but I am saying that perhaps the President of the United States is set as world president at the midnight cry to tackle the problem of Islam and other problems, and to inaugurate the changes in the world governing system which will result in the implementation of the one world government at the Sunday law. Having put the system and structure in place prior, as did Joseph, whose work can be marked at the midnight cry Sunday law time period. And it's illustrated by Darius, who can also be placed at the midnight cry Sunday law period, line upon line. And as seen in Constantine's work, to set up a new government in the East after the division of the empire began in AD 330, which can also be marked at the midnight cry. I suggest that this mighty king and his kingdom would then be broken at the Sunday law, after having stood up at the midnight cry, when national apostasy is followed by national ruin. And the word dominion used when speaking of the breaking of this mighty king's power means a parallel empire. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he rules. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. Daniel 11:4.
Hey, when you're plucking up his kingdom right here, remember this word pluck up in Daniel also refers to the plucking up of the three horns that place the papacy on the throne of the earth, and there are three horns that have to be plucked up at the end of the world for the papacy's deadly wound to be healed: the Soviet Union, the United States, and the United Nations. He has to conquer all three of those. They got to be plucked up. So that's fitting here, but let's just run by this for a second. He's saying that from 330, this dealing with Constantine, first Sunday law, division of the kingdom, 321, 330, but it's also 321, 330. So the kingdom's divided right here is what he's saying. and that from this division, Constantine's trying to get control of managing the one world government. Right? So you got Constantine. You got Constantine, let's put him here. Figuring out how to manage a kingdom that's divided. Yes, that's what he's saying. Then you have the 2 years of Darius he's throwing in there. All right, go ahead.
He's suggesting, if I read this correct, is he suggesting that at the midnight cry, the mighty king stands up?
Yes.
Did we read that correctly? Okay.
And do you have a problem with that? I have no problem with that. The mighty king, that's what he says. He says, I'm not denying this. The mighty king, the seventh kingdom begins here. But look at the struggle we had over here with the false teaching that the day of the Lord began in 9/11. But the evidence is that the day of the Lord begins at the Sunday law. This is the day of the Lord's preparation. But the reality of it is that this is the day of the Lord for the Levites, and this is the day of the Lord for the priests. It's being inferred. I mean, on and on. You can pull several witnesses. Satan personating Christ, Satan coming as an angel of light, and Satan taking control of the foolish priests and doing an activity with them, probably. So that the fact that the mighty king stands up here and he's suggesting that there's a standing up in advance. I mean, the prophetic application allows you to do that.
Does that mean he's going to stand up at midnight too? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm dealing with his paper, but yeah, I'm not threatened by those kind of parallels is all I'm saying. But the perfect fulfillment of him standing up, this is the beginning of the seventh kingdom. This is the advance work for the seventh kingdom. I don't know what this is. Sister Brittany.
The writer didn't say that though.
Okay.
Because he was being very specific. He said the mighty king stands up at the midnight cry and the kingdom's broken at the Sunday. Like he said. Really
It's a progression.
For what's the first sentence
where?
of that paragraph? Top of page 5.
Okay. Yeah.
So if we're going to take the end of what he says and say, okay, that's what he means, then we're disregarding that. And he was making sure that we understand that he's not fighting against the idea that this is the seventh kingdom when the mighty king stands up.
Yeah.
Another place that we know that the world was under one government is in Desire of Ages, page 32.2. It says that the nations were united under one nation, one language was widely spoken and was everywhere recognized as the language of the literature. This is right before Jesus was being born. So I was just wondering if that history could help us determine when the one world order would be put into place.
Yeah, we use that, but I don't know how it impacts this.
The world's united under the United States with the language of English being the parallel.
Yeah, Bronwyn?
Where are we?
His
His kingdom is broken and divided progressively from the previous pattern set forth. The division begins at the midnight cry and is completed at the Sunday law. I think another point I could add to this is based on the number 4 in Bible prophecy. I acknowledge that as a group we are yet to go back into Daniel 7 through 12, but I will simply derive one consideration for the purpose of this email.
Sister.
Excuse me. In Daniel 7 there is 4 beasts, which I believe can be placed in the 4 periods of 1989, 9/11 in Babylon, 9/11 Midnight Cry, Medo-Persia, Midnight Cry, Sunday Law, Greece, Sunday Law, Close of Probation, Rome. I will not attempt to get into the nuts and bolts of these considerations. Neither will I pretend to understand it all. but bringing Daniel 8 into this application. The two-horned ram would be from 9/11 to midnight cry, and at midnight cry, the he-goat with a notable horn comes and breaks its two horns. I am suggesting this is identifying how the two fundamental principles of republicanism and Protestantism are officially broken at the midnight cry with the implementation of martial law, the first Sunday law, etc. And the President of the United States becomes the notable horn of the kingdom of Greece, the 10 kings and globalists, and rapidly sets up the one world government which, when complete, will afterward be taken from him and handed over to the dreadful beast of Rome at the Sunday law, and his nation will be ruined. I still acknowledge the one horn being higher than the other, marking the Protestant horn gaining an ascendancy over the Republican horn in the formation of the image of the beast at the midnight cry. But I think based on the previous pattern, there are parallel empires running simultaneously. So I would suggest that the Persian horn coming up last is Cyrus, the ravenous bird, conquering Belshazzar in Daniel 5 at one level, while Darius is taking the reins and establishing a new government simultaneously, which I think would line up with the notable horn breaking that which made the United States a glorious and sovereign nation, Republican and Protestantism.
Okay. He's saying that this is Babylon, right?
Right.
And
All the way to
Greece. What's the close of probation? First off, is this acceptable?
Yes.
To say that these kingdoms correspond to these prophetic periods.
We start with other number 4. If you put the mighty king at the Sunday law, when the Pope becomes the ruler of the world.
If you put the mighty king at the Sunday law, when does the Pope become the ruler of the world?
At the same time?
Yes. We wouldn't have said that a couple years ago, but even though a couple years ago we knew that you have a handful of places where Sister White specifically and directly says that at the Sunday law the threefold union is in place. If the threefold union is in place, the head that's ruling over them is the papacy. So you have right here the fall of the sixth kingdom, the arrival of the seventh kingdom, and the arrival of the eighth kingdom right on its heels. Because the eighth is of the seven. And okay, so what is he saying? When you get to here, this is the part that will be hard to put in place and be accurate to his logic. So help me with this. The two-horned ram would be from 9/11 in midnight. The he-go. Okay, so here the notable horn comes and destroys Medo-Persia. Right? That's what he's saying. Okay. Is that a problem?
A little bit.
Why?
See a little bit of a problem because of the flipping back and forth we keep doing with the United States. They're representing needs, and I'm just saying for myself.
flipping back and forth.
Yeah, at one point the Medes and the Persians, and the notable guy is the Persian king, and now we're saying the notable one is the Grecian king. I'm just saying.
Where did we say the notable one was the Persian king?
No, we just identified the Persian king was Bush I, right? Or he's a Persian, and now we're flipping him over into a Grecian, and I'm just.
Maybe a different line.
Okay, so the
flipping
at
back and forth
first
of labeling at will seems a little
at
bit-
first what'd she say? At first glance, the wheels seem all confusion.
Okay, it's a little confusing to me.
Okay, I get that part. That's why I'm asking for help to walk through this. I'm having difficulty trying to be fair to what he's saying, to hold the ball in my head.
I just want to point out that America comes from the name Amerigo, which means rich, powerful ruler. And also in Greece, when we're dealing with the ram, or was it, no, the goat, the notable horn actually in the word Hebrew, it's actually named the word kazut, which actually is a breakoff from the word hazon. So it's actually meaning more of a vision. So it could be applied that a midnight cry, Greece coming in and dealing with the vision, the horn representing a vision, was taking down the Persian.
I don't get that, but I mean I get it, but
With the word notable in the Bible.
yeah, but it's totally not. It's not germane to this. But I followed what the definitions were, but I don't know how a vision breaks the United States right here. Is what I'm getting at.
The new.
The what?
The new. I mean, we know that a midnight cry, there's fear, and there's a dream that cannot be interpreted, a vision. I don't know.
So still, that notable horn is who? Who's the notable horn?
Well, the president of the United States.
All right, it's Alexander the Great.
Right, Alexander
Okay, so is it the kingdom beginning to be set up there or not? So back to here. All right. I will now move one or two more considerations. Whose turn to read? Brother Rick.
Based on the understanding that pagan Rome typify the United States at one level, I would suggest that the leaders of the Romans, Mark and Daniel 11, can also represent the leadership of the United States at one level. With this in mind, acknowledging that we do not understand it all, I will give a summary of some thoughts that we have been considering in this part of the Lord's Vineyard, based on Daniel 11, verses 16 through 23. Without getting into too many of the verses, verse 16 marks the beginning of the conquest of Rome. And one historical event marked in that verse is the Battle of Pydna, when the Roman forces began a long war with the Greek Empire, which concluded with the victory of the Romans at the conquest of Syria. The Greeks are the dragon power, and I am suggesting that this could be identifying the long war with the USSR, the Cold War, which resulted in a victory for the armies of Rome in 1989. But verse 16 covers more than one event, and part of what is marked in verses 16 through 23 is four Roman leaders: Pompey, Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, and Tiberius Caesar. And each of these Roman leaders had some degree of control over Egypt. I will focus on the third and fourth of these Roman leaders. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. But within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom. But he shall come in peaceably, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overthrown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, all, so the prince of the covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up, and shall come strong with a small people. Daniel 11, verses 20 through 23.
So, what is he now suggesting? He's going to suggest that this is Pompey. This is Julius
Augustus.
Caesar, Augustus Caesar,
And Tiberius. Yeah. Augustus Caesar.
Augustus Caesar,
And Tiberius.
and Tiberius. Okay, and he's going to focus on these two kings. And is it valid to take verses 16 through 23 of Daniel 11 and apply them at the end of the world? History is repeated at the general sense, but Sister White has a statement where she says much of the history that's taken place in fulfillment of this prophecy, which she's defined in Daniel 11, will be repeated. So there's some places in the Bible where she puts an extra emphasis on it. So it's okay to take verses 16 through 23 and try to bring them down to the end of the world, right? Okay, so let's read on.
The third leader of pagan Rome, referenced in Daniel 11, is marked as a raiser of taxes, and what is also associated with him is the glory of the kingdom. But his successor would be a vile person who would not be given the honor of the kingdom, and the word honor can also be translated as glory. So this new king would not receive the glory of the kingdom. In his days, the glory would depart based on the verses. And it is in the days of this vile person that Christ was seized at midnight and condemned to be crucified. Then verse 23 marks the league of the Jews, which though historically transpired before verses 20 through 22, seems to fit sequentially in the end time prophetic narrative.
You know what she's saying here?
Yeah.
The League of the Jews comes before verse 16 when those that are going to exalt themselves to establish the vision and shall fall. But in the sequence of these verses, it's placed, so he's going to make an argument that there's a league between the Adventist church and the government that can be recognized in the grammatical narrative, not the historical narrative, if that's the right way to say it. Go ahead, my sister.
The suggestion is that the third of these four pagan Roman leaders noted in Daniel 11 is Obama, who is also the third of the kings of Persia in the earlier verses. And what is noted about this administration is the raising of taxes and the glory of the kingdom. This is subject to verification by you who are better acquainted with the American system. But it seems Obama was indeed a raiser of taxes in a marked manner, with things such as Obamacare as an example, and I am sure he is trying to work on more policies for worse taxation before he leaves office.
That's pretty cool.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Sister Brittany. Top of page 7.
Yeah. Then he is to be succeeded by a fourth, who is a vile person, the next president of the United States. And he
Do
or she-
either of those persons qualify for the word vile? Okay, go ahead.
And he or she shall not receive the honor or glory of the kingdom. From him the glory is taken away, and the glory of the United States is civil and religious liberty.
And we read that quote on Sabbath. If you're not familiar with it in your Sabbath notes, Sister White says, the glory of the United States was the Constitution. Okay, so this is a correct application on that point, if it's in the right place in the prophetic sequence.
This is removed in his days, and it is in the time of his administration that the seizure and crucifixion of Christ is repeated. At one level, this can all be placed at the binding off for the priest when Christ is seized at midnight and people cry that he be crucified. Then the league made with him is referring to the Roman Jewish treaty, which again I acknowledge is not sequential in this verse, in these verses historically, but I think it can be prophetically. This, I think, could be referring to how the Seventh-day Adventist churches come on board with the Sunday law movement at the midnight cry. But this agreement will not stand, for this power will act deceitfully, and according to the prophetic narrative, will eventually turn against the Jews of today. This proposition of Daniel 11, 16 through 23 recently opened up another story with the four kings.
1 Kings 11 and 12. This is a story, or you didn't read, Tyler?
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
This story is the story of Solomon, which was the third of 3 kings which ruled over the United Empire. But in the time of the 4th king, Rehoboam, the kingdom was divided and 2 parallel kingdoms ran simultaneously. Rehoboam ruled in the two-horned power of the south, and simultaneously Jeroboam became the king of the 10 tribes and worked to establish a new government. It became quite sobering upon considering that Solomon reigned in the glory of the kingdom, and he was a raiser of taxes. Continue.
He's saying Solomon was a raiser of taxes, and he's going to give you a Bible verse to show that, and that Solomon represents the glory of the glorious land, right? And that in this history, when the kingdom is divided, which he would say was the midnight cry, that the glory is removed when the Constitution's overturned, and there's 2 parallel kingdoms at that point. That's where the king of the southern and northern kingdom begins, and that's where the 2 sticks are separated that come back together when? At the midnight cry. Yeah. That's where the process of them coming back together begins. Sister Brittany.
If you don't mind, could I backtrack?
Yep.
To 2 paragraphs before. I'm not stating what I agree with, but he's a little inconsistent with what he said about the 4th king being far richer. He was saying that that's not literal. It could be applying to like economic strength of the United States, and then he applies this literally about the raising of taxes, and I'm wondering where we marry the consistency of this.
I'm not threatened with prophetic symbols having characteristics that are literal. I don't think it denies it. That's the dilemma that we've dealt with when we look at the pioneer understanding of the trumpets. We're saying that after the cross, prophecy is to be applied spiritually, but we know that the pioneers were correct in their understanding of the trumpets because their understanding is represented on these charts. Yet when you go into their logic of how they discovered and identified who Islam was in Revelation 9, you have this problem about some of the symbols are understood literally. Okay, they're literal attributes of these people. And so this may not be really speaking to what you're saying. I can do it up here easier. If this is the United States and Clinton is the first, second, and third that shall still stand up, and the 4th is far richer. If you're treating this as the president's, okay, that's one thing. But if you're treating it as the kingdoms of Bible prophecy, okay, this is talking about Medo-Persia. 3 kings shall yet stand up. The kingdom that followed Medo-Persia would be Greece, pagan Rome, and papal Rome, and then the USA. So what I'm saying is at either level, you got some of it's literal perhaps, but you got 2 witnesses there at either level that it's about this last president of the United States.
Why would you separate pagan and papal Rome? I know this verse is a much larger discussion, but
it's not going to. It won't produce.
If you didn't, you probably have the 4th being richer than them all, because the papacy is involved in all kinds of money.
Okay, I didn't answer your question directly, but I don't know how to answer that one. We haven't figured that out. But you're aware of that, right?
Yes, that we haven't figured out.
Haven't figured out why sometimes when we demand that we apply the prophecies in a spiritual style, that there are still characteristics of those symbols that we understand as literal.
So, are we going with a literal taxation?
I think if what he's saying here about Augustus Caesar and Solomon is valid, then I would think you would have two witnesses that the characteristic that marks this biblical symbol here is an emphasis on taxation. And this brings you to this final president, okay, whoever he is. And what our brother in Africa is saying is that at one level, the United States falls here at the midnight cry, even though the fall is not complete until the Sunday law. Okay, so if this is the end, if this is where the glory is removed, the Constitution is fully overturned, so to speak, at the first Sunday law, you can see all that logic, then this king here, this Obama, his emphasis on taxes is an emphasis at the very end of the United States on taxes, and the very beginning of the United States there was an emphasis on taxes. No taxation without representation. It was an issue at the beginning of this country, it's an issue at the end. So what I'm saying is, I think you have justification to say that taxes are a characteristic that are part of a symbol that needs to be recognized. You got both that's what the Boston Tea Party was about, right? And it was patriots that did that, right? And we got the patriots at the end protesting taxes.
If you go back, Brittany, to page 4, he identifies it as a grammatical argument. What they're using is a grammatical argument to say that it wouldn't fit as a literal symbol of actual personal wealth. It would be wealth of the nation.
Yep.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's why they don't do it. It's not because one should be prophetic and one isn't. They're talking about wealth in both things in a literal fashion, but...
Okay, thank you. Using Solomon as an illustration of someone that raises taxes, he has a quote, Prophets and Kings, page 88. And then he says, and Rehoboam, his successor, was a vile person, who they did not give the glory of the kingdom. That's all true. And in his days, the kingdom was divided. That's true, just as stated in Daniel 2:5, Genesis 47, etc. And he was the fourth king of Israel, which can represent the United States. The division begins at the midnight cry, and right where the division occurs, Jeroboam stands up as a mighty king of the 10 tribes, the 10 kings, the United Nations. Okay, so you see that argument there, that even though we're saying that it's the last president of the United States that does his kingdom of the United States ends as he's becoming the leader of the seventh kingdom, the United Nations. In this story, he's saying that Jeroboam and Rehoboam are representing that one character at the end of the world, and begins the work of setting up a new government. This seemed to line up with Joseph's work, Darius's work, Constantine's work, and I suggest Daniel 11's mighty king's work during the midnight cry testing time. And the fourth king and the mighty king of Daniel 11 verses 1 through 4 are the same administration, Egypt and Joseph's new government, Cyrus and Darius, eastern and western Rome, Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and the fourth king and mighty king all simultaneously. The final point I will make is that in 1 Kings 11 through 16 is the story of the 7 kings in the days of one king, Asa. And the last of the 7 kings is Ahab. Asa rules in the southern kingdom for a period of time where there are 7 kings in the northern kingdoms that rule. And the last of those kings in the north that rules during the reign of Asa is Ahab. Okay? So that's what he's saying. And the last of these 7 kings is Ahab, who began to reign in the 38th year of Asa. Okay. All right. And there seems to be a consistent theme in the story of the number of these 7 kings, and that is a prediction by God's prophet identifying the downfall of their empire. And the number 38 has to do with the lifting up of God's people, and it seems that the emphasis of this 7 thunders is a nuts and bolts message identifying the nature of the downfall of the United States and the stealthy but rapid rise of the threefold union of modern Rome, which message will lift them up to public attention. And one of the things constantly referred to is the pissing against the wall of the house of these kings of Israel. And another thing is referred to as well, which is what I want to close with, is the raising of a new king and the destruction of the kingdom of the United States, whose house is divided between dogs, globalists, and the fowls of the air, church power. Here is one example. Therefore, behold, I will bring evil upon the house of Jeroboam, and will cut off from Jeroboam him that pisseth against the wall, and him that is shut up and left in Israel, and will take away the remnant of the house of Jeroboam, as a man taketh away dung, till it be all gone. Progressive. Him that dieth of Jeroboam in the city shall the dogs eat, and him that dieth in the field shall the fowls of the air eat. For the Lord hath spoken it. Arise thou therefore, get thee to thine own house, and when thy feet enter into the city, the child shall die. And all Israel shall mourn for him and bury him. For he only of Jeroboam shall come to the grave, because in him there is found some good thing toward the Lord God of Israel in the house of Jeroboam. Moreover, the Lord will raise him up a king over Israel, perhaps the mighty king of Daniel 11:3, who shall cut off the house of Jeroboam that day, but what? Even now. For the Lord shall smite Israel as a reed is shaken in the water, and he shall root up Israel out of this good land, plucked up for others beside him. Daniel 11:4. What is he saying here? Do you follow in what he's saying? Who's Israel? It's the northern kingdom. It's the 10 tribes. It's the United Nations. Do they get plucked up after the United States gets plucked up? Yeah. The 8th is of the 7, but if the 8th is the one, it's the head. So I think he's addressing the whole transition to the third world, the threefold power of the 8th kingdom. Okay. Sister Pam, you want to have a closing prayer?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this day and this class that you blessed each one of us to be able to be a part of, Father. Thank you for your leading and guiding. We ask that you lead us into all truth and help us, Father, in understanding these things. We thank you for your goodness and mercy upon us, and we pray, Lord, that you help us as we go about our day, Lord, to live this day according to your will and to do all to your glory.